brings up a statement that's been made in the financial press. Some say that if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman Brothers and sisters, the financial meltdown may have been avoided or less severe. What do you women think of that?
I'm looking at this is Mary Ellen Stanek. I'm looking at one of my colleagues who spent 20 years at Lehman Brothers, and he's nodding as I'm smiling at him. I think that's very much the case. And Melody did a really nice job talking about whether it's groupthink or, I put it, even well-intended people don't necessarily stand up and say, today I'm going to be biased, today I'm going to build an all-white team, and have most of the power held by white men who all went to the same kinds of schools and grew up in the same kinds of neighborhoods. Nobody, or at least I don't think they set out to be like that and think like that, but they go with who their circle of friends are, the comfort, where they were, who they knew, how they went about recruiting. They go back to their own schools. And you got to poke at that and say, wait a minute. And for us, it was our firm's number one source until a few years ago was of new employees was referrals from existing employees. Well, that was the aha moment for me, and I volunteered to head up the firm's diversity steering committee at the executive level for the firm. That was the aha moment. So if you're largely white dominant, male dominant historically, no wonder you're not moving the needle as much as you want to, despite being very much a great place to work. So you got to really start challenging those things. And in Lehman Brothers' case, whether it's the risk modeling, I think it would have been different. It would have just been a wider lens, a wider perspective.
Anyone else want to comment? Lehman Brothers versus Lehman Brothers and sisters? Okay. Well, let's talk about women's investment styles versus men's. Do you think women evaluate risk and reward trade-offs differently than men do in managing funds? Liz, want to make a comment?
I'm not sure differently, but I think because we're all individuals, and so we all have our own style, if you will. Although I do think that we were joking about this earlier today, that there is something to be said for women getting the job done. And we were talking about how this meeting basically came together, and how when we know that there's something to be done, we just sort of grind through it and get it done, because completion at the end of the day is what's important. And obviously a good job is the most important thing, but also getting it done. And I like to think of myself as not so much of a procrastinator, but I do admit that there are times when I leave things to the very last minute, but I never fail to end up getting the job well done.
Well, from my own perspective, I can't really judge because, again, having worked with so few women until coming to my current firm, I did always feel that I personally was more risk aware of how I managed funds, being aware of especially what I don't own, because I always feel like that's one of the biggest risks you take in a portfolio. It's not the 50 or 60 stocks that you own, it's the 10,000 stocks that you don't own out there. That's really the big risk, and being very aware of that, and always getting a blank stare when I explain that to some of my colleagues. So feeling like there was something missing, but certainly not across the board, and I've worked with some fantastic risk managers who were men. But I did bring along, there was a study done a year ago, someone actually looked at this, and it was put out by the National Council for Research on Women, called Women in Fund Management, and they did look at women's management styles against men's. And I'll just read this here. They found that women tend to be more consistent investors, holding investments longer and processing a greater level of informational detail, including contradictory data in making decisions. And on the other hand, men tend to manage actively, meaning they trade more often and base their decisions on sort of big picture themes. So they concluded that the men sort of miss out on all that stuff that they don't own, and women be more aware of that. So it was sort of consistent with my own experience.
Okay, from when there is a majority?
There is 30% in my team. A lot of our departments are headed by women, so client services and marketing on the institutional side is a woman, mutual funds is a woman, our general counsel is a woman, our head trader is a woman, our chief compliance officers, we have 2, are both women. So we have very, very senior women leadership at Ariel. I'm not sure if I believe the 30% rule. I think it's more a function of the individuals and their willingness to drive change and to deliver on their convictions. And so I've seen plenty of situations where there's one woman in the room and she's extraordinarily effective. And this idea of somehow they become seen as women, I don't know, my experience, and I say this without sounding or hoping to come across as being in any way that it's problematic, I think people see women pretty quickly when you walk in the room in this industry. And the way that I had someone say it to me once, which I think is so funny, I think they see race first, and I think they see gender second, and then they come pretty fast. And I remember talking to someone about it once, and not in a way that I was complaining about it, but the way he said it to me was the former head of human resources at Pepsi. How long have you been black? And I was like, my whole life. And so when you are sort of very aware and you recognize that people see things in a different way, I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference. The bottom line, I think, is you as the individual and you deciding what you want to stand for and what you want to be. And I have to say, for me personally, I've been in a number of situations, and even sometimes with my own team, so I don't want to make it seem like this is something you have to continually work on. But I've been in situations with my own team where especially some of the women, I have to push them very, very hard to speak their truth and to not be overwhelmed by another guy in the room who maybe has a louder voice or who's exercising a bit more bravado. And I actually try to show them in my own way, not being a jerk about it, but certainly being very, very clear about what my beliefs are and not being a streaking violet, so that I can see if you stand up for what you believe in, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? I say it to them all the time. What is the worst thing that can happen? Someone fires you, and, you know, it's like you go on and do something else. What's the worst thing that happen? They don't like you, and, you know, so those kind of things I think we have to get over, because our natural tendency is to want to belong, at least my experiences. And sometimes that means me included. But I always push myself to go beyond that sense of being included and instead really, really stand up for what my point of view is. And that doesn't mean I'm always right.
I would tend to come down, this is Mary Ellen Stanek, on the same side as Melanie. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to the 30% kind of rule. 2 of the 6 named portfolio managers are women, so a third technically are women, and we have several senior female investment managers or analysts, and our COO is a woman. So very talented, very important roles for them. I would say it's this other issue, and that is going back to teams and not building teams that all look the same and think the same. And so the constant challenge is to keep adding, it's a mosaic, keep adding to it, and giving that new talent and that different talent a voice. Morningstar came in to spend some time on site with us a couple of years ago to do a profile, and the thing they came back on, which I was really pleased, was one of our younger people, in this case a woman, they said, we were so impressed by the voice they're given by those of you who have so much more experience